Okay, so we're going to talk about non-state actors. It's transnational non-state actors. Now, what's so significant about this is um, really almost everything we've talked about so far in this class has been about state actors. And even to some extent, we've talked about the United Nations. The United Nations is just basically a collection of state actors. So what we want to talk about today is we want to talk about what do things that aren't states, what role do they play in international relations? That's going to be the topic for today. So let's just sort of kick this off by talking about what are some types of non-state actors. Now, obviously, one of them is individuals. Now, obviously, if you've paid attention to anything, they've said you are super special, you're a snowflake, individuals are so great, you are the greatest thing ever created, blah, blah, blah. That's fine and super, but individuals tend not to make a big splash in international relations. We're just talking about one out of billions of people. I mean, even Donald Trump, to the extent he makes a splash, it's because he's the head of a state. So there are a few people, like, for example, Nobel Peace Prize winners that can really sort of do a lot. Maybe George Clooney, the Kardashians, but they're a family. But anyways, individuals can do things, but let's not assume they can do too much. The way that individuals tend to get things done, not only internationally, but nationally or locally, is they team up with others. And once they team up with others, we're not talking about individuals anymore. But individuals are one type of non-state actor. Another is transnational companies, or sometimes they're called MNCs, multinational corporations. And the idea here is like, Walmart, Exxon, these are all big companies. They're not states, but they're also not individuals. They have lots of economic power, not military power. Remember, only states have military power. So the things we're talking about here, we're not talking about military power. We're talking about other types of influence, power, etc. And let's be clear, transnational corporations like, again, Walmart, these guys have a lot of pull, a lot of say, etc. Then there's non-governmental organizations, NGOs. These would be like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, World Wildlife Fund. These are all non-governmental organizations. Now, really, the whole thing that makes you a non-governmental organization is you are an organization that's not the government. So technically, these are NGOs as well. But usually when we're talking about this, we're talking about things that have causes rather than profit. Profit, causes, that's probably a good way to sort of differentiate the two. And for our purposes, what we really care about are these international non-governmental organizations. But it's a fine line between NGO and INGO. Another group are intergovernmental organizations, IGOs. So these are, again, organizations between governments. So a good example of an IGO would be the UN, NATO. These are IGOs. They're not states, so they're not governments, they're not states. They're also not nothing. And then another group we want to talk about is called networks. This is a harder thing to wrap our head around, which is why I have a reading you're going to read after this about what a network is. But think of it as connections of these things, how they connect to each other. Those are networks. Networks tend to operate along particular issue lines or as particular causes, things like that. We'll talk about that a little bit more after you've read this next article here, or the next little bit from a book from Keck and Sekink. One more thing I want to talk about before I send you off to do that. I want to talk about the theories. What are the theories, our beautiful theories of realism, liberalism, blah, blah, blah. What do they say about non-state actors? So before I throw you out here what it's going to be, what do you think realism is going to say about non-state actors? When I say realism, you say, good job. And then, do non-state actors have power? And again, when I say power, what I mean largely is military power. Like Walmart's got a lot of economic power, but can it transform it into military power? The answer is no. So what would realism say about non-state actors? So what? If you're a realist, this day in class is not that useful to you. It's just not. We're not talking about power today in that sense. And so realism says, so what? Liberalism, What does liberalism say about non-state actors? Like an NGO, they can enhance cooperation. They can actually make it easier to cooperate. In the same way we talked about the UN being able to do that, so could Human Rights Watch. It could also help, there's a W, it could also help enhance cooperation. And then what about constructivism? What does constructivism think about non-state actors? When I say constructivism, you say norms. They can help contribute to norms. Okay, so go read this article and we'll come back and talk. Well, it's not an article, it's a part of a book, Activists Beyond Borders by Margaret Keck and Catherine Sitkink.